Welcome to the Armchair Coaching Podcast. My name is Coach Sheffer. I am the offensive line coach at Brentsville District High School in Nokesville, Virginia. And we have another great guest today. But first, if you're watching us on YouTube, do us a huge favor and like and subscribe on this video. We are trying to grow our community here on the podcast, trying to give out more knowledge to all of you coaches and all of you football fans in general. If you're interested in listening to this in podcast form, we are found on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, as well as many other podcast platforms. So tonight's guest, we have Coach Josh Runda. Coach Runda is the defensive coordinator and linebackers coach at Bluffton University, which is a Division III school in Ohio. Coach Runda, welcome into the podcast.
Coach Sheffer, appreciate you having me on, man. This should be fun.
Yeah, I mentioned right before we started recording that it's unfortunate how the scheduling kind of worked out. You are my first defensive coach. I should have had you on here before because I have a personal thing about that. You know, I was a defensive coach the last 2 years, and I've really gotten into defensive football. But you know, everyone wants to hear about offense, so I think I kind of jumped into offense. But this is some good stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight, Coach. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you this first question. I'm always fascinated by every coach's story because we all seem to have our own unique story of how we became a coach. So could you tell us about your coaching journey? Basically, how did you end up where you are now?
Yeah. And like you said, we all got our own stories, and certainly there are many different paths. There's no right or wrong path to this thing. I think if you love coaching, then you have a willingness to do whatever it takes to stay in this profession as long as you can. So my journey started off, and we'll just start right from the start. I played football at the school that I'm coaching at now. Knew I wanted to get into coaching probably by about my junior year of college. Really had a good feel to know that I wanted to get into coaching. And as senior year started to approach, started to, like everybody, I sent my application out to a bunch of different schools and was waiting to hear back, and got one phone call. And so it was a prep school right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So I graduated on a Sunday, hopped in the car, drove 10 hours on Monday morning right after I graduated college, stayed in a very nice hotel you can only imagine on a just recently graduated college student budget. Woke up on Tuesday morning, drove the rest of the drive, interviewed with the coach at the prep school. He said, hey, if you're willing to drive 12 hours for this job that does not pay very much and the hours are not going to be great, then I'm going to be willing to offer you the job. So before I left, I had a job and was driving back to Ohio, and was going to work in Ohio for the next couple of months, because that was May, June, and July. I was working a summer job and was going to go back out to the prep school in August. So I was painting houses in late July. A buddy that was still on the staff at Bluffton, that was a GA, called me up, and I was literally hugging a toilet because I was trying to paint behind it. If you've ever painted interior, you can only imagine that picture. So he called me and he said, hey, we've got a GA opening. The head coach would love to meet you and come up. And it was a different head coach than what I had played for. The school had gone through a coaching transition and a coaching change. So went up, met with the new head coach, and it was going to be a much better situation. I was going to be a graduate assistant, getting grad school meals, housing, stipend. It was a great deal, and it was at my alma mater. So I said yes, called the guy out at the prep school, felt terrible about it because I was supposed to be there in the next couple of days, but felt like it was the best move for me. So GA'd and got to work with a great coaching staff and really started to build my idea of what I wanted to be as a football coach. And the staff was very much relationship driven. And so worked for really, two great people, and finished my GA job at Bluffton and started to apply and look for some different jobs. And one thing I'll say, if you're a young guy in the coaching profession, once you get a little bit of experience on your resume, it certainly becomes a little bit easier to get your foot in the door and to at least start to get some of those interviews and be able to get in that process. So ended up interviewing at Ohio Wesleyan Division III school just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Went there for a year, worked for Tom Watts, had a great experience. Pat Delaney, their DC, has been there for a long, long time, and that staff was great. Really good staff to work with, and really enjoyed those people, enjoyed the area. From there, I got the opportunity in my fourth year of coaching to be a graduate assistant at the University of Indianapolis, which was a D2 school, and made some connections from my time at Ohio Wesleyan that got me over to UIndy, and got to work for Bob Bartolomeo. And Coach Bart was a very much so an old school coach. I mean, our scripts were written in pencil, which you can certainly appreciate. But he knew what he wanted, and his expectations of you as a football coach were very demanding, but was just a great guy to work for, and learned a lot, especially about the organizational side. And so I was GAing at UIndy, and that was a $10,000 job stipend, came with meals. At that point, I didn't need grad school, but there was no housing. And so talking about wanting to stay in coaching, I needed to find a way to make that stipend work there, and got myself a very cheap apartment on the north side of Indianapolis, up on 38th Street there in Indy, and Airbnb'd my apartment, and Airbnb'd it to make rent. Drove Uber, drove Lyft at nighttime to make some extra cash to make this coaching dream continue to work, and grinded it out for a year. Had a great experience. Went undefeated, 11-0. Went to the national playoffs. It was awesome. Was there for about 12 months, and got a phone call from the head coach at Wilmington College, who had been the offensive coordinator at Bluffton when I GA'd there. He had a full-time opening come open, and I think before he even offered me the job, I said I would take it, because at that point I was so tired of sleeping on couches and in my car when I was Airbnb in my apartment, that I was ready to have a little bit of stability and make an income. So went to Wilmington College in Ohio for 6 months, and again, as I guess fate would have it, got a call from Bluffton University, again a different staff but the same defensive coordinator. They had a full-time opening, and it was a chance to go back to my alma mater, and I knew that it was a chance to go somewhere that I would have some growth. Just didn't realize how quick that growth would be. I took the job in June. The defensive coordinator actually took an athletic director job in July. And without ever calling a play, and without having a true playbook in hand, the new head coach at Bluffton at that point in time promoted me to defensive coordinator, and really, really appreciative of that opportunity. He took a chance on me. And the only thing he knew about me is that painting, it comes full circle. All he knew me was as a painter, because we were repainting the offices at Bluffton when he took over. So didn't know a whole lot about me as a football coach, but it's been a great 2 years, going on year 3 now, and have really enjoyed my time thus far.
Wow, that's quite a journey there, Coach.
All over the place.
Yeah, man. So the next question I have for you is, I've been doing kind of a deep dive this past off season into a lot of the culture and leadership side of coaching, because I feel like that was a part of me that was lacking. Could you describe your own personal leadership style as a coach?
Yeah, and I think this goes back, and really everybody I've worked for, I've been fortunate that they've been relationship people. And so to me, my leadership style is relationship driven. But I want to be a great relationship builder and a great teacher to the young men in our room. And so I think it's important. One of the things that we do as a staff each week is we meet with our guys, but it's outside of everything football. So we have these meetings one-on-one with these guys, and we can't talk football with them. So we talk academics, we talk about what's going on in their personal life. And so, as well as I do, you can't go out on the football field and coach, everybody in your position group the exact same way, because Joey over there might have something going on, family related, and so-and-so's got something else going on. And so as coaches, when you take the football field, you've got to somewhat be cognizant of all of those things that are going on with those young people, so that if they're already having a hard day, then it's got to be a pick-me-up day maybe for that guy. And so I really try and do that. I try and be myself on the football field, and really just try and be myself as much as I can around those guys, so that they know that when I'm talking with them, I'm being as genuine as possible, that I have their best interest at heart. And I think as I continue to continue to be in coaching, I think I continue to see how important the relationship side of this whole thing really is when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with the relationship part because personally, for me, I remember the first day that I met my head coach, the guy who I'm working for now, and I said, "Look," because he asked me the same question, and I said, "I'm not going to be the guy on Friday night that you're relying on to give the speech to pump up the team. That's just not who I am, right?" Um, but I'm going to be the guy on the sideline with my arm around my player, talking to him, talking through a play, or that kind of stuff. And so that's the type of relationship that I like to build. I'm not the rah rah, go type of guy. Even though I'm a big fan of you know, head coach at Minnesota, but I'm just not that guy. But you mentioned in our Twitter conversations that um, one of the topics that you like to talk about is coaching the why. And that's something that I've seen a lot, especially on Twitter, um, reading books like, Culture Defeats Strategy, stuff like that. So to you, why is it important to coach the why? And do you see this help players buy into what you're doing?
Yeah, my thing with coaching the why is these young people these days. We can say what we want to say, but the young people of these days are more educated than ever. And I'm a really big believer in that. And they're getting snippets of information, but they're getting so much information all of the time. And if they can fact check anything they want. I mean, you can fact check anything you want nowadays, just by picking up your phone and looking at it. So I encourage our guys to ask the why of things. It's, and coaching is philosophy, certainly. And I'll never say, there's a right way, and the way that we do it's the right way, and the way somebody else does it is the wrong way. This whole coaching thing is philosophy. It's what you believe as a coach, is your coaching style and how you coach things. And to me, it's really important to coach that why, because guys do, like you said, they buy into knowing the reason that they're doing something. And so something that I challenged our defensive staff this offseason with as much time as we've had was going and looking at our individual drills and finding that individual work and finding it within the games. And so when we go and we have these position meetings with these guys, we can coach, hey, here's why we're doing this drill. Here's the purpose of it. And then here it is showing up on the game tape. And so when those guys can see, hey, coach here in this is teaching me this, and he's teaching this to help me with that, I think is really, really important for your players, so that they can see it. I mean, it just, today's generation, for the most part, are very visual in the way that they learn. And so I think it's, I tell my guys all the time, and some coaches may hate it, but I tell them to ask me the why. And I think it makes us as coaches better football coaches, makes us better teachers on the football field, because you can't just say, hey, jump, and the kid's going to say how high anymore. He's going to say, well, why am I jumping? And now as coaches, we've got to describe that reasoning to him. How are you helping him in his development, I think, is what a lot of young people want to know. And I don't think it's, young people trying to challenge us as educators and as coaches as much as it is they want to know the why, because they want to know the reason behind some of that stuff. So it's really important on the football field. It's important academically for us. We ask our guys to get learning resource center hours at our university. And so that's our version of study tables. So I had a kid within the first 2 weeks of school starting up, and he's saying, well, coach, I don't have a whole lot of homework to do. Why do I need to go to the LRC? And why do I need to get those hours in? Well, you need to do it, right? Because it's going to make you a better student, right? And how can it make you a better student? Well, let's plan ahead. Let's look at what the next couple of months look like assignment wise. Let's start working on some of that stuff. And so he was, part of him was probably trying to challenge the fact that he had to go to the Learning Resource Center. But the other side of it is we've got to educate them on that stuff, right? We've got to give them the reason on why they need to be doing those things and how it's benefiting them, I think is really the biggest thing for me when it comes to coaching that why.
Yeah, what you're saying definitely resonates with me because that was one of the things I had to work on, um, especially when I was coming up with drills. Why? And I had to think to myself, if somebody asked me why I'm doing this drill, I need a good reason. I can't just do a drill just as a time filler, because there's a lot of those out there, and they will fill up the time if you need it,
Yep.
but they're not really helping you out. Um, and so, and my linebacking core in the last 2 years, I've had quite a few very intelligent linebackers come through, and they weren't trying to, like you said, they're not trying to question you or question your authority. They want to know, and once they know why they're doing something, they're much more likely to actually go out and do it with some effort. Um, and then in the game, if they know why they're doing something, they'll execute at a higher level. So I definitely, all that resonates with me, and I definitely agree with what you were saying, Coach.
Yeah.
Um, we also talked a little bit about culture, and the question I wanted to ask you is, how does the coaching staff at Bluffton, how do they coach the culture, and how do you as a position coach teach your culture in your linebacker group?
Yeah, culture has been a big one, and I know that's a popular coaching word is to throw around the word culture. For us at Bluffton, it starts at the top with our head coach, who's done a great job with it. Our core values at Bluffton are family, academics, football, and so when we start every team meeting that we have, there's a PowerPoint, and those three words are up on the PowerPoint: family, academics, football. We have a code of conduct, that we would like our guys to follow, and it's the yes sir, no sir, mentality on some things. And our head coach always says, it's not military, it's manners. And so I think it's important to continually to teach those guys that stuff. And when they walk into our stadium, the first three words that they see on each wall, there's two sets of stairs. The first three words they see are family, academics, football, and it's always in that order. And so we preach to those guys, hey, it's simple mathematics, right? If everything's good family wise, if everything is good academic wise, then 1 + 2 = 3. And so I think our head coach has done a tremendous job of instilling that, and he lives it. I mean, if we have a guy that comes to him and says, hey, coach, I've got to miss practice because of a family obligation that I have, there's no hesitation from him. He says, go, take care of it, go be a part of those moments that are those once in a lifetime events, and all of those different stuff. The biggest thing for us is just communication. And I think that's probably the biggest and probably the most difficult for our young guys is just learning how to appropriately, communicate and when they need to communicate and what all they need to communicate. So I think that's been a big side of it. And culture's hard because you go on the football field, right? And you coach for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and you coach in your individual meeting, right? So you're coaching football 2, maybe 3 hours a day. In my eyes, you're coaching culture all the time. And you've got to, if you really want your guys to buy into it, then you've got to be coaching it. And I think, for the head coach, he's got to trust that his assistants are coaching that culture within their position group all the time, and that we're speaking with the same commonalities, we're speaking with the same words, we're using the same terminology. If we're going to be family, academics, football, then we need to hold, those guys accountable to it. One thing for us, there's no hats in meetings and in classrooms. And so when you walk into a position meeting room, I, as a position coach, I've got to monitor that, and I've got to make sure that nobody's doing that, so that the next team meeting we go into, that they don't think that it's okay. And so I think it's tough. Culture is a tough one, because if you're not willing to coach it all the time, then you're never going to get the buy-in from your players that you need. And it's something that you've got to be on all the time. when you're around, those guys. And you got to make sure as a coach you're living it too, because you can't hold your players to a higher standard than what you're holding yourself. And so if we're going to ask them to be accountable in certain degrees, then we've got to hold ourselves as coaches to that same accountability and make sure that, we're getting all of our work done too, and doing it in a timely fashion and making sure that we're getting everything done. So culture, man, it's a great buzzword for sure, but if you're not doing it all of the time, then it is just that. It's just a buzzword. You've got to live the culture all the time, and you've got to coach the culture all the time in your program.
Yeah, as a teacher, I see that too, because you can't change from day to day, and you have to be um, a man or woman of your word and do the things that you say you're going to do, and or else the kids they'll sniff a rat out, right? If you're not who you say you are, they know, right? And you got to live it, like you said. It's not just a 9 to 5 thing. You got to live that life. So it is hard, like you were saying. All right, let's talk a little bit about X's and O's. All right, you mentioned a little bit ago that you were hired as the defensive coordinator, and you didn't even have a playbook yet. Did I hear that correct?
You did, yes.
All right, so here's my question for you: where do you start to build a defensive playbook? Like, what's your starting point?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. So when you're a small Division III program like we are, you start by opening a blank PowerPoint up, titling it Bluffton University Playbook, and you start hammering away. So I started that thing in July and started, with the communication side of it, and just kind of worked my way up. How did we want to set the field strength and all of that? What was our communication going to be for that? Okay, we've got that set in stone. What are our fronts going to look like? And so for me, with all of this stuff, it was really, really important to use language that made sense for our guys. And I never want our incoming freshmen, really any player in our system, to be buried by the playbook. And I just mean that they don't understand the terminology, or that it's so complicated that they can't quite pick it up. And now I've got one of my best 11 football players standing on the sideline because he can't pick up the playbook. So for me, it was how can I, find terminology that's going to make sense on everything. So we're a 4-2-5 base, and then we play some of the 3-2-6, 3 high safety defense. Fortunate enough that my head coach at Bluffton is now on the staff at Iowa State. So he's been a great mentor for me and a great one to be able to bounce questions off of and get, some information when I needed some advice, certainly. But going back to the naming and making sure that all of this stuff makes sense, give you an example. In our 4-man fronts, we've got one call that where we can set our front to the boundary, and we've got another call where we can set it to the field. So our call to set it to the boundary is Hoosier. And we call it Hoosier because when I think of Hoosier, I think of Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers. And now we know that we're going to set the front into the boundary, that IN being, that indicator of where we're setting the front. And then Husker is our field call. So we're going to set the front to the field when we call Husker. When I think of Husker, I think of the Nebraska Corn Huskers. I think of corn fields. And so we're going to set the front to the field. And you'll notice both of those start with the letter H because they're going to be determined based on the hash. And so all of that stuff went into developing the calls within our playbook, and then structurally just building off of it. And I took bits and pieces. I mean, I look like a mad scientist for about a month, for about the whole month of July when I got named defensive coordinator, because I had my Bluffton playbook open. I had Ohio Wesleyan's playbook open, UIndy's playbook open. Me and the DC at Wilmington College had started to work through some of this stuff in the short time that I was there. So, I had that stuff open and pulling bits and pieces, but I really wanted to make this, and I don't want to say that it's mine because I refer to it at Bluffton. It's our defense. It's, our staff's defense. It's our players' defense. But developing it was certainly quite the journey, pulling, bits and pieces from a little bit of everywhere. And the biggest thing, like I said, was just making sure that the language was going to make sense for our guys. And so we spend a lot of time looking at the scheme and breaking down film, but when we come up with something new within one of our staff meetings, we spend half the time just trying to think of a name that's going to make sense for what we're putting in and what we're installing for our guys, so that when we take the field, they don't have to think about why we're calling something. They know what the indicator is and what it means. So I think that's to me was a big piece of building it. And we built from the fronts up to how we wanted to fit the run out of those fronts and what our run fits were going to look like, and used a lot of core concepts from what I learned at the University of Indianapolis for that. Coach Chris Keevers, who's their head football coach now, is tremendous defensive mind and does a great job of fitting the run. So there were some of those ideas I wanted to use on that. And then coverage wise, what coverages could we play that were going to fit based off of how we were fitting the run. And so we're a +1 system all the time here. And then to complicate things, we're playing two different defenses. So we've got to be able to tie those two things together. And again, it's a big verbiage thing. So we try and speak a common language amongst our defense. We ask our guys to memorize different formation names offensively, so that when they come off to the sideline, we're all speaking in one common Bluffton University defense of football language. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit, but the big thing for us was how can we simplify and how can we make the verbiage make sense for our guys?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I do not envy your position trying to figure all of that out. But I bet it was pretty, I would have to say it's probably pretty fun and a little kind of tiring and exhausting trying to bang all that out all at once. So you got multiple voices coming in and out, like, and that could be competing because it's like, they want something, but then they might also point something out that you'd miss, and so it's like it's
we at that point in time we were still trying to hire our other full-time defensive coach. So that first year, our DBs, who is our other full-time defensive coach, got hired like the week of camp, and so we were installing this new defense for these guys, and he was still learning it himself. But going back to our head coach, he's been awesome. He is very hands-off on our defensive scheme. I mean, he'll pop his head in and he'll sit in on some of our meetings to see what we're doing. But as far as telling us what we need to be running or anything like that, I mean, he is as hands-off and lets us do what we want to do. And so I'm very, very thankful for that, because it's some of it's a little bit of trial and error. I mean, we were putting the 3-2-6 stuff in 2 years ago. There weren't many teams that were running it. So to find tape on it and to be able to install it, we really had to get it on tape ourselves just to be able to show our guys.
Now, have you been able to run this defense yet, or is it still?
Yeah, so the first year we were about a 60-40 split. We played our 4-2-5 stuff about 60% of the time. We were playing our 3-2-6 stuff about 40%. This past season we were 50-50 split. So we really try and mesh the two concepts as much as we can, so that our guys aren't learning two different defenses. And so we tell them, the one thing is we can do everything in our 3-2-6 that we can do in our 4-2-5 stuff, but there are things in our 3-2-6 that we can't do out of our 4-2-5. I believe I said that right. Just coverage wise, being able to drop 8 out of that 3-2-6 defense. So there's some different stuff that we can do there, but it's been good. It's been a challenge at times, but our guys, have bought into the system, and extremely thankful for that.
So the next question I have for you is about adapting your defense. So how do you adapt your defense when you get players of different skill sets from one year to the next? So let's say, for example, you have a really good class of DBs one year, and then the next year you have a really good class of defensive line. So are you changing anything up, or are you calling some different calls? Like, how are you adapting your defense from year to year?
Yeah. And Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's is what I start every one of my recruiting spiels with when we're talking ball with our recruits on campus, right? It's players over scheme for us. Who do we have? Where are our dudes at? Where are our best football players? I walked into a situation where We had the best defensive end in the entire conference. He was the best defensive player in the conference. I mean, he was a two-time all conference defensive player of the year. And so when you got guys like that, right, it's going back to the simplicity side of what does he do well, and how can we get some matchups to where that guy's going to be able to play fast. But I think, like you said, you've got to be able, as a defensive coordinator, certainly as an offensive coordinator, being able to adapt to what your personnel is and what your strong suit is. And at our level, where you're not given athletic scholarships, you don't always know what you're getting from kids. I mean, we evaluate and we watch film and all of that stuff, but you don't know until you get them on campus, until you get them into your scheme, and you got guys coming from all over. And again, when you're not offering athletic money, it's hard to be able to completely pick and choose guys that fit within what you do defensively or what you do offensively. So we take that camp period to find out where our best position group is. Some of those players early on that we think are going to have an opportunity to play. And then it's, well, what do we got to do to put our best 11 football players on the football field? And some weeks that's playing our 3-2-6 stuff exclusively. Some weeks that's playing our 4-2-5 stuff exclusively, or maybe we're going to play a mix of both. But and it comes down to situations too. And our level, we luckily, and you're hoping the refs are doing it, but they've got to hold it. If the offense subs personnel, then you can sub, and you've got time to do it defensively. So we can personnel some different stuff, which we've done to be able to get some better skill set guys in just in different situations. So finding ways to get your best 11 and adapting, like you said, some of your stuff to where those best players are.
I mentioned in the Twitter conversation RPOs because that's what everybody wants to know about. They either want to learn new RPOs, or the defensive guys want to hear, how do you stop RPOs? So first question I have first, do you play anybody who runs RPOs? And secondly, how do you prepare your defense to defend a team that runs RPOs?
Well, I felt good about answering this question until you told me I was the first defensive coach that was going to be on here. Now I'm giving away the secrets to all these offensive guys. Nothing we're doing is anything special. But when we're looking at RPOs and we see them in our conference, we see a lot off of single back power. We see a lot off of GT counter. And so our way of looking at them first and foremost is, who do we want to have the football, offensively, right? Is their running back a really good player, and so we're trying to get the ball out of his hands and make the quarterback make a decision? Or, is the quarterback a guy that can he run? Does he have the ability to run the football, or can we load the box because they've got a great running back that they're trying to get the ball to? And then from the coverage aspect off of, defending the run part of the RPO, what's the best coverage that we can still play to it? And so last year we played a decent amount of the tight front stuff, the 4-eye, 0-4-eye. We played the single backer box to it. We stacked our star right in the middle of the football field, and we apexed both of our outside guys. And so we were playing 3-for-2 to both sides, and depending on the side that the quarterback opened up to, what we would declare as the read side, we would have what we call hold and fold players to be able to get an extra player from the backside in the box. And so I think it starts with, who do you want to have the football for the offense? How can you defend the run portion of it? And then what's your best coverage that you can still play while fitting the run off of that run pass option? So, those are tough, especially when they've got a quarterback that can run the football. It's a game changer offensively, certainly. We had a team last year that had a great quarterback. Lucky he was a senior, so he's graduated and he's gone. But he could do it all. I mean, he could throw the football. He was athletic. He could run. So against that guy, he was a little bit more difficult to prepare for. There was another team where they had he was more so of the pocket passer. They still ran the RPO stuff, but he didn't want the football in his hands. So we were able to stack the box a little bit in that regard. And they had a great running back, best one in the conference. And, felt like we had a decent day against that guy.
Awesome. Last question I got for you tonight. It was a very simple one. Why Bluffton? And I think you may have answered it a little bit earlier, but why Bluffton? What makes it the right fit for you?
Yeah. And so I've had the unique opportunity to pick Bluffton 3 times, and I picked it as a student right out of high school. I picked it, I had the opportunity to drive 13 hours away. The second time picking it wasn't very difficult because I got to stay at my alma mater, and it was a much better deal. But this third time was tough because I had just taken, a full-time job at another school. I was only there for 6 months, and it was hard. It was a really hard decision. But I think one of the things that has kept me at Bluffton and kept me coming back to this place, and I know a lot of people say, there's great people and there's great people there, and the people are there. There are genuine people at Bluffton University, and I've never felt like it's been a place where people are there and just looking for their next job. And there's just so many great people. Genuine relationships are built. I mean, our baseball coach has been there for a long, long time. Our basketball coach has been there over 25 years. Women's basketball coach has been there 10 plus years. So you've got all of these coaches within the department. Our AD has been the athletic director for a long time. Before that, he was the head athletic trainer at the university. So to me, it has been a place where people come and they typically stay because there's just great, great people around that really care about our students. They care about each other. They care about the community. And so it's been a great place. And anytime you get the opportunity to surround yourself around good people makes it, in my eyes, makes it a very easy decision to stay in a place. So it's been a great place to me, and I'm very fortunate to be back at Bluffton.
Yeah, if I ever had the opportunity to coach at my alma mater, I would definitely have to think hard. You know, it,
There,
it
there
it would be hard not to. So
and there are certainly there are positive and negatives because our athletic director still gives me a hard time about being one of the leaders and wearing some of the costumes that I did for the student section during basketball games. So getting past some of that stuff of who you were as a student at the university, and getting those people to see you as their peers can be a little bit of a hiccup in its own right.
yeah, I had a I almost had the opportunity to go coach at my former high school, and while my former head coach was still there, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to coach, you know, kind of like the same situation there. Like, I don't know if I really want to coach for him or not. But okay, I won't keep you up too much. The last thing I want to talk about is a kind of like a final thoughts, words of wisdom kind of thing. There's a lot of coaches. Most of our listeners are high school coaches, but we've got a couple others out there. There's a lot of coaches out there who aren't playing this fall, and there it seems if you watch Twitter, there seems to be a lot of coaches who are having a hard time finding positives in our situation right now. What would be some words of wisdoms that you would have for those coaches out there who they need to be able to find those positives, but they just can't?
Yeah, and that can be tough, and I understand that. I've looked at this thing and tried to be as positive as I can, and I think one of the things that stuck out to me are the platforms like this that have opened up because of all of this stuff that's going on. And I think as coaches, our eyes have been open to the opportunity that Zoom presents, and I think it's been awesome to see guys connect with coaches from all over the United States, all over the country, and be able to talk football and share that commonality that we all share as football coaches, as teachers. And so I think that's been fantastic to see. I mean, there is so much information on, if you're a Twitter guy, there's so much information on Twitter right now related to the game of football and related to leadership as well. So I think it's, you can look at this situation as a negative, or you can look at it as, how can I make myself better on the daily? I mean, there's no excuse at this point, right? You've got, I know you've had Coach Banstra on, who's done a great job with his YouTube page. I mean, he's got a ton of videos on there from high school to college coaches getting on there and just talking football and sharing scheme and sharing ideas. And so I think, if you're looking for the positive out of all of this, it's go find some connections and just connect with people. I mean, I haven't had anybody that's asked me to talk ball where I've said no yet. And so I love talking football. I love the opportunity. I always learn something. I always find out something new about myself or something that we can be doing better. So I think it's been a huge, huge, huge personal growth time that we've all been able to have here. So I think that's, one of the positives out of all of this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think I would have started a podcast if I wasn't bored. I mean, that I hate saying it that way because it makes it sound bad, but I was bored and I had an idea. I was like, I originally had a blog, and I honestly haven't written in my blog in so long because I have 2 kids. It's hard to find time to sit down and write.
Yep.
But podcasts, you don't have to write. And the ideas I have is like, this is going to take too long to write this down. And I could just sit here and talk, and we've got Zoom that can do all the recording for us. So doing something like this has definitely helped. I told some of the other coaches that it's kind of like therapy for me. Just being able to talk ball, because there was a time where I didn't even have access to the coaches on our own coaching staff, because we couldn't have coaching meetings and stuff like that. So you didn't have that after practice coach's office talk that you usually have. And so I was having withdrawals. And so I was like, I'm going to do a podcast, but thank God for my wife. And she was approving, but she was like, when are you going to find the time to do this? I eventually found the time, but
no doubt. And I appreciate it. And I'm sure many other coaches that listen to this show appreciate what you're doing. And guys like you, guys like Coach Banstra, all of these different platforms that have opened up to share ideas, share concepts. I think we all found out one thing about ourselves as football coaches, and that's that we got no hobbies outside of football, or very, very few hobbies outside of football. And so learning the hard way, luckily, there's some college football on TV now, and there's all of these different platforms to certainly learn and grow.
Well, Coach Runda, thank you one last time for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Awesome. This has been Coach Sheffer, and we are signing out.